Welcome to the Resistering Show with your hosts, Trina,
Tiffany,
Tonia.
Join us as we uncover, discover, and recover together. Today's topic is boundaries, and we are three sisters in our adulthood who came back together to work on a podcast. And part of this podcast is a lot of healing, a lot of growing, and a lot of figuring out who we are in relation to each other. And that means letting each other grow, letting each other be adults, and not relating as we did when we were children. So this topic has been really hard for us and really charged. We're having a really hard time focusing on what aspect of boundaries we want to talk about. Tiff, why do you think this has been such a tough topic for us?
Well, it is emotionally charged. Some of it comes from childhood. Some of it comes from codependent nature of lack of boundaries. For me, it comes from constantly having to redefine myself or even define myself so that I can actually set a boundary, because that was the hardest part for me was, what do I like to eat? What do I like to do? Who do I like? What type of person do I want to be around? And what type of person am I? Because I was always told how to feel, think, and be.
Wow, you just got me.
Yeah.
That really got me because, we grew up in a dysfunctional home, like probably all of our listeners, or why would they be listening to us, right? But that's no excuse for being adults and having no boundaries and not even knowing what that term is. And when we were little, a lot of us in our culture, we are fed food. We don't know if we like that food or not. We join churches, we drive certain cars, we have certain political beliefs, we have all these things that aren't ours. And so I, just like you, had no idea who I was. What do I believe? Where did that belief come from? And do I believe it? And I spent a lot of time having no idea what I believed. And I started having to look into that. What about you, Tonia? Do you think at 50 years old, you have healthy boundaries now? Or has that been a journey for you?
I have started to utilize my voice, and it is every day a learning, growing experience that I have to keep myself in check and make sure that I don't escalate into outrageous comment or action because I have not set a boundary or the people have not heard me. Maybe my voice is too low. I have to figure out that happy little balance where I'm not going to escalate. And when we were little, I would take it and take it and take it, and then I would just blow up. And my sisters were like, ha, 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 I just did that to get your reaction, So that is my goal, is to keep utilizing my voice and just keep it real, keep it where I am not exploding and out of control, but people are listening to me.
Thanks, Tonia. Sorry about that when we were kids. I'll keep saying sorry. But I get that. I didn't know I could say no. I didn't know I could have an opinion. And instead, I just got really angry and I went inward and did things to hurt myself because I was so frustrated. I thought that I was supposed to take care of you. I thought I was supposed to be the sheriff of the universe. I thought I was supposed to walk in your house and clean it all up.
So do you think that's some codependency intertwined in the reason we are able to set our boundaries? Trina's looking at me really funny.
Well, because it's codependency, and under codependency is lack of boundaries or unhealthy boundaries or too rigid boundaries. So I believe, I don't want to speak for you two also, but I believe we're all recovering codependents, that we didn't know that we mattered, that we were allowed to have a voice. And it doesn't mean that we have to go around being, harsh, as Tonia said. If you, for instance, asked me to watch your children and I had something important that I needed to do, but I felt guilty and said yes anyway, I would be resentful at you and your children. And that wouldn't be fair to anybody. Instead, if I had healthy boundaries, I would say, hey, Tiff, I wish I could help you out, but I have an appointment that I do not want to cancel. Please ask me again. But I didn't know how to do that. And I didn't know how to do it in a way that wouldn't alienate you. So it's been quite the journey.
Yeah, I totally understand that too. Where you had said before, no is a complete sentence. That once you do say no, you don't have to justify, argue, defend, or explain. You really don't. And when I would watch other people set these boundaries, I would actually feel uncomfortable. The boundaries weren't set for me, but I could be standing next to somebody who is setting a boundary to, say, their spouse. And I would get actually uncomfortable and say, oh my gosh, how did you just say that? What did you just do? And it was interesting feeling like I had to sit in that uncomfortableness. So now when I set boundaries for myself, because I know who I am, when I set a boundary, I have to actually sit in the uncomfortableness because the other person is physically squirming and they're upset because it's affecting them. And it served them how I used to be. And it no longer serves me to be the way I used to be. So when I set that boundary and that person is upset and they might be telling me that I'm ridiculous or I don't care about them or I don't love them or all of the crazy things that they say, I actually have to continue to sit and be uncomfortable until that person calms down and hears me. And Tonia, I know exactly what you're talking about, the whole crazy thing, like screaming and yelling and getting angry. And during one of our phone calls, Trina, we had talked about anger, and I would get angry because I felt like nothing was mine. Like I didn't matter. So if I got angry, it would stop people from trying to take something I enjoyed away from me.
And Tip, you talked about that could be your time. Like maybe it was the first time you got a chance to watch Netflix, or you were trying to do yoga, or you wanted to take a nap. And the only way to get people to leave you alone is to get all big mama bear and scary, rawr.
Yes.
And you talked about that hurt you.
Yes, it does.
You manifested with anger. I manifested internally doing things to hurt myself, such as binging and purging, alcohol, over-exercise, all kinds of different things to hurt myself to try and get back at you. So it's like, that's really smart. I'm hurt, so I'll show you I'll hurt myself. And just like you, I didn't have any boundaries. I didn't know I could say no. And funny enough, when I was going through a divorce, we tried marriage counseling. You know, that's typically, you got to check that off the list.
Right.
And the counselor gave me a tool to use. And he said, when things are getting heated, you're allowed to say, I don't want to discuss that anymore. Let's stop and pick a different time and day to continue this conversation. And I said, what? I can do that? And he said, absolutely. I had no idea I could say, this is getting heated. I don't want to discuss that. Or please don't talk to me that way. Or I need to go to the bathroom. Anything to protect myself. I didn't know I had those tools. Do you guys have those tools in your life now?
Yeah, it's because for me, I would get more drawn into myself. The more I was confronted with things coming at me, the quieter I would get, the more I would store it inside. And that is not good, because that's only, as Trina says, hurting yourself. And that's one way she might have demonstrated her hurting herself in one way, and me keeping everything inside was actually just hurting myself. Nobody else cared if I was just sitting there being quiet about what they were saying and what they wanted me to do. And it's good, very good to feel when you start utilizing your boundaries, because you do start to feel powerful.
I like that, owning your power. So we get to own our power. We get to sit in that power. And one thing that just popped in my head as you were talking about that, because I do remember as children, we would all just be very, very quiet about things and kind of take it and take it and take it. And that explosion, whether it happened actually verbally or some other way, it exploded into addictions or cutting or whatever that we would do to harm ourselves, because we didn't actually have a voice that we could tell our parent. So I'm emotional because I'm a parent, and guess what? My children do invade my boundaries sometimes, but guess what? I get to teach them how to set boundaries. And one example of that was, we were at the playground the other day, and my daughter is almost 5'1", and these boys had recognized her. And the boy's mother was actually sitting there at the playground and not paying attention to what the boy was saying to my daughter. And it wasn't bad. It was just, hey, my friend thinks you're pretty. Well, she was mortified and she was very, very embarrassed, because she was just there to have fun and play. So she and I got to talk about how to set a healthy boundary, what to say to somebody, how to handle that situation if it ever does arise. Whereas when I was a child, I didn't know how to handle those situations. And even even as an adult, different situations because of not having been taught. So that's one thing I'm proud of and I'm excited about, because not only do I stand up for myself and have my own boundaries, but then I can also set those and show my children and teach them and guide them.
That's beautiful. And I have 2 children and I have a daughter also, and she's an adult now. And these are ongoing conversations. You know, when we were younger, we'd get smacked on the butt in middle school and not know how to handle that. You're supposed to think it's funny. You can't say no. There's a lot of bullying that goes on. And social justice really starts with me. I have to know what my boundaries are, what's okay and what's not okay, and be willing to stand up for those. But I don't always know. Sometimes I need to go along with the crowd, or I don't know how to have a voice. And even working as an adult, I worked at a part-time job, and sometimes I would get asked to fill in, and I would have my day planned, and I didn't want to. In the past, I would have felt like I had to. But I learned that I could just say, "Oh, I'm sorry, I'm not available." That's a complete sentence. I didn't even know I could do that. But that's how it starts, little things. Also, if I don't feel things are going well for me at work, if people aren't being treated properly, I'm allowed to have my say. And it's okay if I have my say and don't get my way. That's the first part of setting boundaries, is actually speaking up. But the big thing for me was learning to speak up in a way that was loving and firm.
Don't go over the cliff with everybody else.
Right. Because when I attack you, I'm just going to get anger back. Nothing gets resolved. And that's what I heard Tiffany's working on right now. How do I set a boundary without having to go extreme and scare people away? I mean, this has been really hard. And 15 years ago, when I woke up and started my healing journey, I found out I had no boundaries, no self-love, and no self-esteem. And I really didn't know what any of that meant. And it's just been little things, all along the way, and helping our children and sharing our stories with them, what we didn't do, what we wished we had done. And I love what Tiffany does with her children, and I do this with mine, is we talk through what could we have done differently. Are you okay with speaking up and getting flack from that? Are you strong enough? And one of the biggest things that I found out was I'm not a victim. I have choices. And I'll tell this little story because when I was married, I'd gone to a therapist and she said, "You're here to get a divorce." And I said, "No, I'm not." She goes, "Lots of women get a divorce. It's not that big of a deal." And I was not emotionally ready or able to deal with any of that. But what I learned is I could say, that's okay. I'm going to stay in this marriage until I'm able to handle it. I can leave. So I was no longer a victim. And that was huge for me. I didn't know I could do that either. But all these little boundaries along the way have helped me be direct, be comfortable in my own skin. If you're stepping on my foot, I'm like, "You're on my foot. You need to get off my foot. I don't like what you said to me." Tonia actually had brought up a couple weeks ago something that I did. I didn't respect something she said. She had a very good suggestion. She suggested we not curse on our episodes. And I just blew it off. And later I said, wow, she's right. And I respected that, but not in the moment. And so I could come back to her and say, "Hey, you're right. I blew that off. I'm sorry. I should have listened and respected what you were saying." So
Don't
Tonia,
ever fear walking back.
So I'm sorry again, Tonia. 2 sorries in one
Oh
episode.
my gosh. Wow.
Wow, that's a big deal.
Well, I think that's all I have. I'm kind of petered out.
Well, like I said, I'm so proud of this episode because you guys have no idea how many times we tried to record it and we just weren't feeling it until, you know what it was? Until we recognized that it was attached to codependency so strongly, and finding a voice for ourselves and understanding who we are. So I'm proud of all of us for being able to look in the mirror and see each other and see ourselves.
Thanks, Tiff. Thanks, Tonia.
Thanks, Trina.
You're welcome. It's been a great episode. So that concludes today's episode. We look forward to you joining us next time as we continue to uncover, discover, and recover.